This is Gentle Confessions, where truth speaks in a whisper, and healing begins in the quiet. Tier 1, the night I disappeared. Without a word. I don't think anyone noticed when I left. Not really. I remember standing in the hallway that night, my hand resting on the doorknob like it might burn me if I turned it. The apartment was quiet, too quiet except for the soft hum of the fridge and the faint whisper of traffic a few blocks away. Everything else had fallen into that hush that only happens when something inside you is breaking, and no one knows but you. There were no fights, no slammed doors, no crying. Just a slow, suffocating silence that had been building for months. A quiet I couldn't breathe in anymore. And so I left. I walked out the door with nothing but a backpack, a $20 bill, and a heart full of things I hadn't dared to say. No one stopped me. No one called after me. I didn't leave a note. Not because I wanted to hurt anyone, but because I didn't know what I would say. I had become a ghost long before I disappeared. It's strange how easy it is to vanish when you've been fading for so long. The streets were wet that night. It had rained earlier, and the sidewalks shimmered under the street lamps like they were holding secrets. I remember walking for blocks, not really knowing where I was going, just walking, like I could somehow outpace the ache inside me. I passed people, couples, late-night buskers, someone with a dog in a yellow raincoat, and none of them looked at me. I wasn't sure if I wanted them to. I think I was hoping someone might, but also terrified that they would. Because if someone asked me, "Are you okay?" I wouldn't have had the strength to lie. I ended up at the train station. Not to board anything. Just to sit. There's something about train stations at night that feels like purgatory, like you're not anywhere. Not really. Just passing through. That was exactly how I felt. Like a person in transit. Between selves. Between lives. I sat on a bench under a flickering light and watched the schedules change on the big board. Names of cities I didn't know. Times I didn't care about. But somehow, just being near movement made me feel less stuck. It was the first time in months I felt the quiet wasn't crushing me. I should have felt free. Liberated. But instead, I just felt hollow. Like I had untied myself from everything, and now I was just drifting. No anchor. No destination. I replayed everything in my head, all the moments I'd bit my tongue. All the nights I cried quietly into my pillow. All the times I said I'm fine when I wasn't even close. And I wondered if anyone would ever notice I was gone. That thought stayed with me for a long time. Would they notice tomorrow? In a week? Would anyone open my door? See the empty bed? And feel the space I left behind? Or would life just go on coffee brewed? Dishes cleaned? Routines continued with no void where I used to be? I wasn't sure which answer would hurt more. I pulled my hood up that night and curled into myself, trying to disappear further. The city lights blurred through the raindrops on the station window, and I let my breath fog the glass. I didn't cry. Not then. That came later. That first night, I just felt invisible. And maybe that was the most painful part, not the leaving, not the fear, but the fact that I could disappear so quietly. and the world wouldn't flinch. That's the kind of silence that stays with you. Even now, years later. I still wonder if anyone remembers that night. If anyone felt the shift. If someone reached out and found only emptiness. But maybe this whisper in the dark is my way of being heard. At last. Tier 2, the room that remembered me. I came back. Eventually. Not with a grand return or some cinematic reunion. There were no outstretched arms or gasps of surprise. Just a soft click of the key I had never given back. And the door opening to the same room I had once escaped. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe dust. Maybe silence. Maybe nothing at all. But what greeted me was memory. Not people. Not voices. Just memory thick and warm and waiting like an old coat you didn't know you missed. The apartment looked smaller somehow. Or maybe I had grown. The couch still held the same faint crease where I used to fall asleep reading. Curled sideways with a book slipping from my hand. The kitchen still had the chipped blue mug I always reached for. And the corner of the hallway still squeaked if you stepped on it just right, like a little breath caught in the floorboards. Everything had stayed. Everything except me. I walked slowly, like a ghost, retracing their final steps. I touched things I hadn't thought about in months, the edge of the table, the worn fabric of the armchair, the photograph still pinned to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a cat. We looked happy in that photo. We were happy. For a while, that was the hardest part, I think. Knowing that joy was once real. But still not enough. I didn't come back to stay. I knew that much. I came back because something inside me whispered that I had left too quietly. And that silence had started to echo. I needed to see if the room still remembered me. If I still existed somewhere within its walls. And I did. Oh, I did. There were notes in my handwriting, grocery lists, reminders, a sticky note that said, "You've got this," on the bathroom mirror. I had written it to myself once, after a panic attack that left me trembling on the tile floor for hours. I had forgotten that moment, but the note hadn't. It waited there, faded and curling at the edges, like a love letter from a past self who still believed I could make it. I sat on the edge of the bed. The same bed I'd stared at the ceiling from, night after night. The same sheets. The same quiet. But this time, I wasn't suffocating. This time, I was simply remembering. I laid back slowly, letting the mattress form around me. And for the first time, I let the tears come. Not out of regret, not out of guilt, but from the ache of something unfinished finally exhaling. The room hadn't judged me for leaving. It hadn't closed itself off or become cold. It had waited patiently, silently, like an old friend who knew I would return when I was ready. And that broke something open in me. Because maybe not everything punishes you for disappearing. Maybe some places just hold space for when you find your way back. I whispered something that night. Not a full sentence. Not even a word I could hold on to. Just a sound, a breath, a truth that didn't need language to be real. It filled the room, and for the first time in forever, the silence felt soft. Tier 3. What the mirror didn't show me. There was a mirror in that room. Not a big one. Just the kind that hangs quietly above a dresser. Not trying to draw attention, but always watching. I had looked into it so many times before, without ever truly seeing myself. Back then, the reflection it gave me was simple skin, eyes, a mouth that smiled even when it didn't mean it. I had learned how to pose for that mirror, how to hide what trembled beneath the surface. But something was different now. That night, standing before it again, I saw more than a face. I saw the version of myself I had left behind. The one who had tried so hard to be okay for everyone else, even when she was barely holding it together inside. She looked at me not angrily, not accusingly, just tired. Like she had been waiting, quietly, for someone to finally acknowledge her. And I did. I touched the surface gently, fingertips to glass, and whispered, "I see you now." And I did. Truly. I saw the way I had kept performing, smiling at dinners, laughing at things that weren't funny, nodding through conversations while screaming internally for someone to ask me if I was really all right. But no one ever did, because I never let them. I had built walls so carefully, so beautifully. Even I forgot they were there. The mirror didn't show me bruises or scars. It showed me armor thin, invisible, and heavy. And it showed me how long I had carried it, without even noticing the weight. I thought about the night I left. There was no dramatic exit, no slammed doors, just a quiet packing of things, a toothbrush, a sweater, a journal, and a note that simply read, "I'm tired of pretending." I hadn't signed it. I didn't need to. That version of me, the one in the mirror, she knew it came from her. She had written it with every exhausted breath. She had screamed it in silence, night after night, and no one had heard. Until now. I sat in front of that mirror for what felt like hours. Not to fix anything, not to analyze, just to be. I let the memories come. The bad ones. Yes, the arguments, the anxiety, the emptiness, but also the tender ones, the late-night talks, the soft morning light through the window, the music we used to play while cooking. Because healing doesn't mean erasing. It means remembering, differently. I saw myself, not as a failure, not as someone who gave up, but as someone who made a choice. A difficult, brave, necessary choice. To leave, to breathe, to heal, and slowly, in that mirror, I saw her smile. Not the practiced one, the real one. Soft, small, and aching, but real. It was the first time in a long while that I felt proud of myself. Not for surviving, but for choosing not to disappear. There's a strange kind of peace that comes when you finally look at yourself and don't flinch. It doesn't come all at once. It's gentle, like waves smoothing the edges of something once sharp. And that night, the mirror didn't lie. It didn't flatter or distort. It simply held me. As I was. As I am. Enough. Tier 4. The letter I never sent. There's a letter. Still folded. Still unsent. Tucked somewhere in the back of a drawer I haven't opened in years. I wrote it the night after I left. The room I stayed in was quiet. Too quiet. I remember the hum of the fridge. The soft rustling of wind through the blinds, and the pen in my hand, scratching. I didn't know who I was writing to. Maybe to him. Maybe to myself. Maybe to the version of me that still didn't understand why I had to go. I didn't plan the words. They just poured. I'm sorry I left without goodbye. But I had to choose between your comfort and my survival. And for once, I chose me. That line, I remember writing it over and over again, like I needed to believe it myself. I never mailed the letter. Not because I didn't want to, but because deep down, I knew it wasn't meant for him. It was for the echo inside me. The one that kept whispering, maybe you were wrong. And this letter, this fragile piece of paper, became my anchor. It held every truth I was too afraid to speak out loud. You didn't notice when I started shrinking. You didn't ask why I slept so much. You didn't hear me when I said I was fine and I said it too often. I remember the ink smudged halfway through. Not from tears, I didn't cry that night. I had already cried everything I had before I left. It was from the weight of my hand, from the quiet tremble that comes when your heart finally tells the truth. I kept hoping you'd change, but I never asked if I was allowed to. That line haunted me. Because I had built so many versions of the story in my mind, one where I was overreacting, one where I was selfish, one where, maybe, if I had just held on a little longer. But this letter, this unsent thing, reminded me that I had held on. Too long. Longer than was fair to the person I was becoming. And I loved him. That was the hardest part. I loved him deeply. But I had started forgetting how to love myself. That kind of erosion is slow. You don't notice it at first. A missed laugh. A quiet sigh. The way you stop singing when you do the dishes. Until one day you realize you haven't heard your own voice in weeks. This letter wasn't about blame. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't closure. It was a whisper. A reminder. That leaving wasn't weakness. It was the bravest thing I'd ever done. I'm still scared. But I'm learning. I'm still lonely. But I'm free. I still miss you. But I no longer miss myself. I folded the letter slowly. And then I placed it in that drawer, not to forget it, but to honor it, to remind myself that even in the quietest moments in a borrowed room, with a borrowed pen, I had found my truth. And someday, maybe I'll read it again. Maybe I'll write a new one. But for now, its silence is enough. Tier 5, a quiet goodbye. I didn't leave with a suitcase. There was no dramatic exit. Just a soft close of a door behind me, and a sky that hadn't decided if it wanted to rain or not. I remember the gravel beneath my shoes. Every step felt like an apology I couldn't say out loud. But I didn't look back. Not because I was angry, but because I knew if I did, I might not keep walking. Some goodbyes don't echo. They land softly, like snow on an old rooftop. Quiet, gentle, almost kind. That's how I left. Not in anger, not in chaos, but with the weight of every unsaid word folded neatly into the silence between us. I didn't leave to hurt him. I left to hear myself again. You see, when you stay too long in a place that forgets how to hold you, you start shrinking to fit. And I had become so good at folding, at disappearing, at smiling while breaking. But the morning I left, I felt taller. Not in height, but in presence. As if my soul had been waiting years to stretch. There's something sacred about choosing yourself. Especially when no one else sees the war you're fighting. I passed familiar places on my way out the cafe with the chipped mug I used to love. The bookstore where I had once read poetry to him under a flickering light. Each spot whispered memories, but none asked me to stay. It felt peaceful, like the city itself knew, like it had been holding its breath too, waiting for me to finally exhale. I stayed with a friend for a while. We didn't talk much about why I left. She just made tea and sat with me. And that was enough. No one asked for explanations. No one rushed my healing. I was allowed to just be. That night, I found myself staring at the ceiling. My thoughts weren't loud anymore. They were tired, soft. I thought of him. Of the way he used to fall asleep mid-sentence. Of how he always left one sock on the floor. I smiled. Not because I wanted to go back, but because not all memories need to hurt. Some can just exist without pulling us under. The healing wasn't instant. There were nights I missed the warmth, mornings where my chest felt hollow. But every day, I reclaimed a little more of myself. I started painting again. Badly, but freely. I danced in the kitchen. Not because I was happy, but because I was allowed. And one day I don't remember when I realized I hadn't thought about that night in weeks. It didn't haunt me anymore. It had become part of my story. Not the whole of it. That's when I knew. I didn't need to send the letter. I didn't need closure from him. I had written my own. A quiet goodbye. One that didn't slam doors. Didn't demand to be heard. Just drifted into the wind like a sigh finally released. If you're listening to this and you've ever left in silence, know that your whisper matters. That even soft exits carry strength. And that somewhere, out there, there's a version of you already waiting arms open, tea ready, whispering back, "Welcome home."